So today I will talk about ferns and lycophytes, in fact, from the central Brazil. It's a huge area in Brazil with a very typical kind of vegetation. Looks like dry vegetation, but it's not so dry like the Caatinga, like Robin told a few minutes ago. And excuse me. And this is a very interesting area, not for ferns, but for all flowering plants and bryophytes and lichens, fungi. And we can see around a lot of parrots, beautiful animals. It's a very interesting area in Brazil. In fact, my talking, there's just main parts here that just talk about the location in Brazil, the vegetation kind, some floristic studies in this area, so show the plants, and some challenge. So about the location in Brazil, here's just to call attention, this is the Amazon forest that occupies just half part of Brazil in an extension of area. And the Cerrado is about 24% of the state. And this is the orange part here. And here it's the black part, the white part here, it's the Pantanal. It's a lowland in Brazil, and it's very flooded with a lot of aquatic vegetation here. And Cerrado, it's a huge area in Brazil, and but the focus of my talk is just about this central area that is occupied by the Cerrado. Okay. This is a little bit about the definition of the vegetation in this area. So the main vegetation is the Cerrado. And here there is a definition by Jimmy Rutter that studied a lot of parts of the Brazilian Cerrado, including Mato Grosso and Goiás states. And he defined the Cerrado with different physiognomies. There is a part more with a canopy, that is the forest savanna, Cerrado, and it's wooded savanna, park savanna, and there is an open area called the gramineous wood savanna, and there is part of this vegetation occupied by wetlands, but there are a lot of gallery forests, and these gallery forests had a strong influence of the Amazonian vegetation into the Cerrado area. And then we can find some Amazonian species, typical Amazonian species that arrived in the Cerrado area in Brazil. Next, Robin, please. So then the Cerrado covers about 2 million of kilometers square in the central part of Brazil, 24% of the country. And look, this is the same size of the Western Europe. It's a huge area. Elevation, we don't have here high elevations like in the Andes or in the Atlantic forest above 2,000 meters. And I talked about this, almost half part of the Cerrado area is occupied by the influence of the rivers of the Amazon basin. And of course the Cerrado is not restricted to Brazil. There are some areas of Cerrado in Bolivia and Paraguay, and also in Roraima. It's an interesting disjunction in this area, and in Venezuela also. Next. The climate in Cerrado is not so dry. The vegetation looks like dry, but it's not. And it looks like the savannas in Africa and some parts of Africa, of course. There is a strong dry season during our winter. The southern winter goes to from April to September, and the temperature varies not too much. The soils are poor soils with a lot of areas with sand soil and low pH, and this is interesting. High aluminium content. There is one study about ferns in this area that's to show that the plants accumulate high concentration of aluminium. It's about pleopelts that occurs in this area, including the epiphyte species. This is very interesting, not just the terrestrial ones. Okay, and then the soil is well drained, and almost a great part of the vegetation is intolerant to the water logging. Next, Robin. So just to show the phytophysiognomies, go ahead. So this is a very old plateau, eroded by temperature, changes of temperature, rain, and then this is not a rock, a strong rock. This is just like a macizo, but it's very delicate. It's sometimes is hard to climbing these walls because it looks like sandy. And then it's interesting. In this part there are more soil here, and then here we can find these forests at the base of these macizos here, and gallery forest here, and the cerrado at the bottom here. Please, Robbie. The typical cerrado vegetation has this kind of small trees with contour trunks and with sand soil, some rocks here. Next. Some more. There are some very old rocks eroded by the time. Next, Robbie. There are some big rivers in the area as well with this kind of rocks. There are very old rocks here, and interesting vegetation here with a lot of species of anemia. I will show. Next. This is the part of the area is totally open with just small trees. And this is a typical vegetation that occurs in Goiás, this kind of landscape, with this Mauritia flexuosa. And this vegetation kind is called in Portuguese de veredas. And this area is in general, it's a very wet place. Looks like a field of grass here, and so, I can go there very fast and collect some plants here, but sometimes it's completely wet with water until here. More or less, I lose my boots in one place of this because I put my feet, and when I remove my legs, my boot is still there. It's very complicated, and there are some hills as well. Here's another view of that plateaus, the macizos, the forest here. In these areas, among the rocks, we can find some cactaceae, and here's armadillo, and this is just a view of this kind of rocks. Looks like very old substrate eroded. Next. Okay. Here's another view of this, but this is very eroded here. There are some small waterfalls here, these crevices here, and the soil, how is the name in English of this kind of sedimentary, yeah, and you can easily remove these small pieces of the rock from the soil. And here of course, grows interesting ferns. Next, Robin, please. But there are also some limestone rocks in these areas that forms these caves and lakes. It's a very deep lake in the area. I can't remember the name. It's Água Milagrosa in Portuguese, because this water has part of the decomposition of the rocks, and the slaves in the past using this place as a refuge to escape of the farmers, and take shower on this water, and became whitish because the calcareous rocks, when dried, became whitish. And of course, this is a good medicine to the injuries in the skin. It's a very interesting story about this area. And I found a lot of Balanophoraceae. I don't know the genus, but it's very interesting. It's huge inflorescences of Balanophoraceae. A little bit old here, but okay. Next, Robin, please. On the top of these limestone rocks, we can find big trees. It's a lot of roots and trunks. It's a very unusual kind of vegetation around this, with a lot of endemic species as well. Some big birds. Next, Robbie. So there are some floristic studies made in the area. Here there is just a small list of some the old collectors about 200 years ago that visit this area. Saint-Hilaire visit this area, and here the states in Brazil that they visit. Glaziou also visit this, and a lot of plants from this area collected by Glaziou appear in the Flora Brasiliensis, described as new species. Next, Robin, please. Here it's more recent collectors, but we had a gap of collections from 1895 to 1950, about 50 years without collections in this area. When the people started to think about a new capital for Brazil, this area was selected as the one possibility to build in the new capital. And in this time, it's the Instituto Brasileiro de Geografia e Estatística. It's an institute responsible to study the area, make some floristic studies, to indicate which area will be appropriated to build in the city of Brasilia. And we have a botanist in this group of people, called Dora Romariz. He's still working on botany. And so this start again to collect material in this area. So we have other people from this area collecting in Brasilia. Of course, that after the inauguration of the city of Brasilia, a lot of botanists visit this area. So we included Gillian Prance, Wade Thomas. I'm not sure if other people here. Did you collect in this area, Scott?
A little bit, not very much.
Okay. Yeah, because I got this date from the Flora of Distrito Federal, and then there are some list of botanists that. But Jimmy Ratter from Scotland collect a lot of plants, but in Mato Grosso than in Goiás or Minas Gerais. Next, please. There are some checklists and floras, published checklists and flora I think the most recent checklist is the published by Força et al. This is the Catálogo das Plantas e Fungos do Brasil. There are some floras, but of course the Flora Brasiliensis still being the most important floristic study in Brazil, because include all groups and a huge area in Brazil. And then a lot of plants that appear in Flora Brasiliensis were collected in this part of the country. And more recent, we have the Flora of Distrito Federal, published by Cavalcante Ramos, a lot of issues, volumes. And more recently, I published a Fern Flora from a reserve in Minas Gerais, in this area. Next to Robin, please. So this is just the cover of the catalog of the Brazilian plants, published in 2010, the printed version, but still being improved online, continue online. And so now a little bit more restrict, the lycophytes and ferns from Brazil. This is from Brazil, this data. I got this data in December 2012. Here is the ferns and lycophytes, the number of species, endemic species of Brazil, and percentage of endemism. Next, Robin. And here is just the species restricted to the Cerrado vegetation. And then just to remember that Cerrado occupies about 24% of the area in Brazil. And you have about 6 genera and 200 species, more or less, 254. There are some subspecies and varieties, but maybe these varieties could be species as well. Depends of the concept. Next, Robin. And here the ferns and lycophytes, endemics for this area, it's about 20%, according to our current data online in the list of Brazil. But I'm sure that this number is not true. Maybe you have more endemic species, you have more undescribed species for this area, because we don't have many botanists, especially pteridologists in this area of the country. Then we have a big area and without botanists collecting there. But it's interesting because anemia, it's a fern genus, is the most rich genus in the area. And then here's the total of species, and here's the endemic species, and here's the list of genera and endemic species. It's a little bit difficult to search this information from our database, because when we asked for list the endemic species from Cerrado, some species are endemic from Cerrado and Atlantic Forest, for example, and then appear more species than you expected. There is a logical, a problem of logic in the database, and then we can extract the real data. But it's just to have some ideas about the endemisms. And so here's the issues, the volumes of the flora of the Distrito Federal. Here's the first part of the ferns. Appear together other flowering plants. And here this is the first part with Aspleniaceae, Cyatheaceae, Dryopteridaceae, Glycaniaceae. In fact, 18 families for each genera and 100 species more or less. Next, Robin. The second part appeared in the volume 6. And this is the part of the fern flora, together other flowering plants. So here's the location of the reserve that I published, the fern flora. It's the reserve called Panga in Minas Gerais. The main vegetation here is Cerrado and some gallery forest. Next, Robin. This is just the first page of one treatment. for Lycopodiaceae, Equisetaceae. Descriptions, keys, illustrations for our species, for our genera. Next, Robin. Just to pay attention here that we have just the flora for this small black square published. And the area is a huge area, but we have the checklist for Brazil and just the flora for this small area, and not totally published yet. We have more volumes to appear. Next, Robbie, please. Recently, in January of last year, I made a trip to this region, trying to find some plants for my research, and then I visited several localities in this area. So I live in here in São Paulo and goes to the north and find the following plants. Next, Robin, please. So I found, of course, a lot of species of anemia. It's a center for diversity of this genus. And this species grows in this kind of soil, rocks and sandy soil. This is Anemia ferruginea. Next, please. Here it's another anemia species, Anemia buniifolia. It's a beautiful plant that grows in at the base of the rocks. And here's a detail of the sterile frond and the fertile frond. Next, Robin. It's another beautiful small plant. This has about 3 to 5 centimeters tall. It's a very small plant. Here's it's adaxial view, and here it's the abaxial view with the sporangia. It's a very it's old leaves still attached to the plant, and then the plant grows very slow. Next, Robbie. It's another interesting species. This is the sterile frond. It's Anemia elaphoglossai. It's a nice name because reminds elaphoglossum. And this is the fertile frond described by John. Next, Robin. Here it's another interesting species. Looks like two species of anemia, but in fact here is Anemia milleifolia with the sterile frond here at right and left, the fertile frond. It's another endemic species of Brazil. Most of these species are endemic. Next, Robin. Here's anemia with looks like anemia. The most of the genus has this morphology with the sterile lamina here, and the first pair of pinnae became fertile here, and at the base of the lamina. And this is Anemia tenera. I think it's endemic also. I'm not sure if it occurs in Bolivia or just in Brazil. It's just in Brazil, maybe. Next, Robin, please. Oh, this is a very unusual anemia that looks like Notolina, another genus in Ferns, or Cheilanthes. This is beautiful species, Anemia eximium. Of course, that grows in the crevices of the rocks as well. Next, please. This is an undescribed species. As I told before, there are a lot of new species to be described in this area, and John is describing these new species. After how you can say this name in English? But the Latinization here. Rhenii. This is difficult to me. Yeah, thanks. It has an interesting fertile pinna pair here. Grows oblique. Next. So another genus is the genus Cheilanthes. in sensu lato. This is Caelanthus poliana. It's endemic species, also in the area, of course, that grows near the rock outcrops as well. Next, Robin, please. This is another species of Caelanthus, Caelanthus goiasensis, that looks like the anemias that I showed before. This is Caelanthus goiasensis, another endemic species. Here's the adaxial view, and here's the baxial view, with this, a lot of scales and hairs occurs on this plant, and these small black dots here are the sporangia. Next, Robin. This is John, huh? Collecting plants. It's too much sun, John. Put more t-shirt, long t-shirt, okay, because it's too much sun. And John visited this area and found how many new species, John?
We found all but one of the known species in Goiás, 24 of the 25, plus 5 new species.
Yeah, just in one visit of 10 days. Can you imagine if you stay more time in the field, maybe we can improve our ideas, no? Next, Robin, please. And there are some interesting species of Selaginella. This is Selaginella marginata, sensu lato, because this is a complex of species, and that grows in this kind of vegetation. Next, Robin. So this is an interesting plant that grows on those small waterfalls. This is Adianthopsis sennae. This species was described by Baker a long time ago, about 200 years ago, in the genus Adianthum. And it's a very small plant that grows near this water here. But it's difficult to take a good picture of these plants because it's a little bit dark. The environment is dark and very wet, and the camera became completely wet. And this plant is about 5 centimeters tall. It's a very small plant, and the ultimate segment has about 3 millimeters to 5 millimeters. It's a very small plant with just 1 or 2 venation here. Small segments. Next, Robin, please. We suspected that this species was in the wrong genus, and then we sequenced this material, and the species appear here exactly among the other species of Adianthopsis. And then we are preparing a paper to combine these species to the correct genus, and then we use 2 markers to investigate this. It's interesting because the first population that we found at Minas Gerais, but the plant, the entire population was very young. And then we extracted the DNA just to take a quick look at what's happened, and the plants appear among the Adianthopsis genera, and then we found another population of the same species, but very good conditions, and then we sequenced again just to have 2 in our analysis and appear also among the Adianthopsis. And then we go back to look at the plant more carefully, and the main character, morphological character to distinguish one Adianthum species is the presence of venation on the indusium. It's easy to see it, but not in a plant like that. It's very, very tiny segments. And the indusium in this plant has less than 1 millimeter. It's very, very, very small. When you take a look more carefully, say, hey, there is no venation in this indusium. And then it's a good morphological character to distinguish Adianthops from Adianthum. And Adianthops doesn't have the venation. But it's interesting because I saw the type, I saw several collections, but I never pay attention for this detail. I need to sequence the plant first, to go back to the plant and say, hey, what are you doing? You know? But it's happened. Next, Robin, please. So another species of Selaginella, and Selaginella erythrops, that has these reddish stems. It's a beautiful plant, form large populations. Next, Robin. And here's one Amazonian species that arrived to the Cerrado vegetation. We collected this plant in a gallery forest near the Bolivian border, Cáceres in Mato Grosso. And I became very surprised when I found this species because it's so common in the lowland in Amazonia. And it's easy to recognize the species. Semi-chordata is just part of the base of the pinna is chordata. It's easy to say, oh, I know this species very well, but it's totally outside of the main distribution in my mind. My previous data. Next, Robbie. Here's another interesting species that grows on rocks. Is another species of Adiantum, Adiantum delicatum. This species has a bud on the top of the rakes that grows and touch the soil and form another plant. And the margin of these segments are easily to identify the plants because this species has this. This is a projection of the venation at the leaf margin. It's very small indusia. Next, Robin. With venation. This is a true Adiantum. This is another species. This species occurs this and the previous species occurs just in Brazil and Bolivia, in the central part of Brazil, and arrived to Bolivia as well. This is Adiantum sinuosum, another endemic species of this central part of the South America, and has beautiful sorai. This is a young plant, and this is more adult plant. It became very dark brown. It's easy to recognize. These leaves are very coriaceous and occurs in among the shrubs in the vegetation of Cerrado. Next, please. Oh, this is beautiful species. This is Adiantum calcareum that grows in that limestone rocks, and among the crevices of the rocks and the proximal pinna pairs, it looks like it's flabellate. It's so distinct, and in position from the other pinna pairs. And this is endemic also from Brazil. Next, Robbie. And here, Adiantum tetraphyllum. It's a very common species. This species can be found from Mexico to Argentina, and of course also in the central part of Brazil. It's Adiantum tetraphyllum. Next, Robbie. This is another species of Adiantum. It's Adiantum radiano. Also, it's a very widely distributed species. And we found this interesting place. Looks like a Japanese garden with a lot of bryophytes as a substrate, as a soil for this beautiful ferns view. And it's looks like a very old place. Looks like a cave, a small cave, with a lot of ferns near the entrance of this cave. Next, Robin, please. It's another endemic species of Brazil and Bolivia, Adiantum deflectans. Also, has that kind of propagation. The top of the rakes of the lamina has a bud that touch the soil and start a new plant. And here's the fertile fronds and sterile fronds. Next, Robin, please. This is an interesting species, Dryopteris oberi. We have only 3 species of Dryopteris in Brazil. And this species was just overlooked, including it doesn't appear in the checklist of the Brazilian plants. And I found these plants and say, hey, this looks like a new species. And after 1 month, I found the name. No, it's not a new species. This is a distinct species. It's a very small plant that grows on rocks near that small waterfalls in this central part of Brazil. And we found it in this species in Goiás, but also occurs in Pará, near the Serra dos Carajás in Pará state. Next, Robin, please. So, Lygodium venustum, it's a very common species, also occurs in the area as well. Next, Robin, please. So, we have some challenge here. First of all, it's a big area to be investigated. John is an good example of that in 10 days you can find a lot of interesting plants and new species and described species. And unfortunately, we don't have pteridologists studying, working in this part of the country, especially Mato Grosso and Goiás, and the 2 Mato Grossos states, and Tocantins also, that is occupied by the big area of Cerrado. Unfortunately, the natural vegetation is disappearing so fast because to expand the plantations of soya, especially, and corn and sugar cane, this kind of plantation. Charcoal production as well. We have big companies in this part of the country, especially in the north of Minas Gerais, that destroying the original vegetation of the Cerrado, use the first wood to produce this charcoal, and after plant eucalyptus in the area. And then we can find big forests of eucalyptus plantation. It's amazing. Yeah? You can find the trucks along the roads, absolute lines and lines of trucks carrying these eucalyptus. It's stupid. And in fact, in the north of Minas Gerais, the Cerrado mostly disappeared because this kind of destruction. Another challenge, how to identify the plants collected in this area, because we don't have floras, we don't have keys, illustrations, and information about this, the plants that came from this area. It's very problematic sometimes. I spent more than 1 month to find one name for a Dryopteris. We have only 3 species in Brazil, but I spent a lot of time looking for a name for this species. Next, Robin. Another thing that Robin asked yesterday is about how many species in this area are apogamic. We don't know, of course. In fact, we don't know. We don't have this kind of data for most of the Brazilian species. I think including flowering plants and ferns and lycophytes. We don't have this kind of investigation about the plants in our flora. And then it's a big challenge because we know that the plants that grows in this kind of vegetation, dry vegetation, most are apogamic species. This is very important in the evolution of the group, but we ignore this biological aspect, unfortunately, in our studies. Well, it's about the conservation of the area. I show that it's a big area, but we have just 1 to 5% of the Cerrado preserved as national parks or state parks. This is another problem. No? We need at least maybe more than I cited here areas. Of course, that the most interesting areas now are inside of the national parks or state parks, and then we need to get special permits to collect these plants, including for the Brazilians. And And then sometimes you need to wait more than 1 year to get the permit to go to the park, trying to find the plant, because sometimes you walk a lot of several kilometers and nothing. You have some problems with fire, natural fire, that burn the natural vegetation in this area. It's common. And then if you visit the area just after a fire, forget. It's just charcoal and nothing. Our studies, of course, are very important to indicate new areas for conservation. And we need to do, I think the Cerrado is the less preserved kind of vegetation in Brazil. We have a lot of reserves for Atlantic forests, in Amazon for some, but the Cerrado is just 1 to 5%. It's a big challenge. We need to have more botanists in this area, studying the area to indicate these places for conservation, the hot spots. Next, Robin. So, and finally, thanks John for the identification of the anemones. Paulo Labiak shared some anemones pictures as well. And Paola Pedraza, unfortunately, she's not here at the moment, to invite me to give this presentation.